Bonsoir. My name is Marie-Monique Steckel. I'm the president of the French Institute Alliance Française, and it gives me great joy to welcome you to one of our very exciting evenings. It's the third year that we have the Art of Sex and Seduction, and it has been so popular and successful that we thought we should certainly do a fourth one next year. So keep your ears open. The Sex and Seduction series is once again curated by Erica Lumière, who is a wonderful journalist. She's written for Marie Claire, Family Circle, and other magazines very close to family problems. And tonight we have the honor, and I really mean honor, to greet in New York a very rare appearance of Catherine Robbe-Grillet and her companion Beverly Charpentier. And the discussion is moderated by the journalist Toni Bentley. And I'm sure you will have a very thought-provoking evening. I do hope that you will come back for the other two talks that we have Wednesday, October 21st, about jealousy. As you know, this poison that takes over. And jealousy is the talk of the second evening. And on Wednesday, the 28th, we do have another talk to put sparkle back in your relationship. And we all need that, right? So the evening that you are about to begin with us will have highlights from two documentary films. So these are highlights. So you were not going to see the entire film. And it's about Robbe-Grillet and Beverly Charpentier. And it was done for Swedish television by Lina Mannheimer, who is with us tonight. And thank you, Lina, for being here. The first clip that you will see was shot in the 17th century Robbe-Grillet chateau in Normandy that was bought by Alain Robbe-Grillet and Catherine in 1963, so a long time ago. So you will see this beautiful chateau. Following the clips, there will be the conversation, as I mentioned, and after the talk, there will be a book signing in the auditorium upstairs with Catherine, Beverly, and Toni upstairs, and a few books. So thank you, and have a wonderful time.
Good evening, I'm Erica Lumière, and I'm thrilled to welcome you all to the Art of Sex and Seduction. This is my third year as curator of this series, and I have to confess, this is without a doubt the most fun job I've ever had. I hope you all enjoyed Lina Mannheimer's gorgeous film. Her documentary Inside the Life of a Modern-Day Marquise de Sade offers a perfect window into this mysterious world of domination and submission. Lina's film is more than a portrait of power and passion, lust and desire. It is also a story of love and friendship. As Marie-Monique already mentioned, tonight's program, Avec, Plaisir, Ceremonies of Love and Desire, is an extra special one for FIAF. The stars of La Cérémonie and Le Contrat flew all the way from France for a rare public appearance in the US. They will speak as openly and as honestly as they can about their life, love, and rituals. But please save any questions you might have for the end when they'll do a short Q&A with the audience, followed by a book signing. So let's get started. First up, I'm thrilled to introduce the fabulous Toni Bentley, who will be our moderator tonight. Toni Bentley is the author of the Vanity Fair article on Catherine Robbe-Grillet that's in your program tonight. Bentley is a former ballerina at the New York City Ballet and danced with the company for 10 years. She's also the author of 5 books, including Winter's Season, A Dancer's Journal, The Sisters of Salome, and The Surrender, an erotic memoir. She's written for numerous publications, including the New York Times Book Review, the New York Review of Books, the LA Times, Playboy, Rolling Stone, and Vogue. Bentley is a Guggenheim Fellow and has been a featured speaker at the Oscar Wilde Society, Harvard University, Cambridge University, Think, and the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Welcome, Toni Bentley. you. Next, it is my great pleasure to welcome to FIAF our very special guest of honor, Madame Catherine Robbe-Grillet. Catherine Robbe-Grillet is a French actor, writer, and cultural icon. To quote Vanity Fair, the life of Catherine Robbe-Grillet makes 50 Shades of Grey look like a Disney movie. Indeed. Her school years were spent at a convent in Paris, after which she studied law, but then pursued an acting career. In 1951, she met and later married author and director Alain Robbe-Grillet, a leading figure of the French Nouveau Roman movement. In 1956, she published her first book, L'Image, under the pseudonym Jean de Bergue. It was banned and publicly burned in Paris, but today, L'Image is widely considered one of literature's classic sadomasochistic novels. One of her most recent publications, Alain, is a literary account of her relationship with her husband and of her transformation from submissive to dominant. Aside from starring in La Cérémonie and Le Contrat, she recently directed Le Dîner Noir, an art performance in Istanbul, and toured China in a production of Savannah Bay by Marguerite Duras. After more than 50 years exploring eroticism, Catherine Robbe-Grillet is widely considered France's most famous dominatrix. Welcome, Madame Robbe-Grillet. And finally, joining these speakers, we are very lucky to have the other star of tonight's film, Beverly Charpentier. Beverly Charpentier. Beverly Charpentier is a close companion of Madame Catherine Robbe-Grillet. She began training and working as a professional actress at the age of 5. Her first play as a writer was performed when she was 19. At age 22, she wrote the play Le Quart d'Heure de Rabelais, which was first performed in France at the Festival de Metz. At the age of 23, she won the Radio France Internationale Award for Best Short Story of the Year. Until meeting Catherine Robbe-Grillet, Charpentier performed on stage in various theater productions around the world, including England, France, and South Africa. Let's give a warm welcome to all our speakers.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome, and welcome, Madame, to the United States of America, the home of Puritanism, voyeurism, exhibitionism.
Alors, si tu ne traduis pas, je ne comprends pas.
Toni dit bienvenue aux États-Unis, le pays du puritanisme.
Ah,
entre autres.
But we are very eager to hear from you tonight. She has been a dominatrix also all her life. In fact, her favorite kind of man is a dominant man, so she can dominate him. Catherine was married to Alain Robbe-Grillet very happily for 50 years. He had other female lovers. Madame had both male and female lovers, and it was open and it was loving. And I think she had many more lovers than he did.
Alors elle dit que vous étiez mariés pendant plus de 50 ans, que Alain avait des maîtresses, que toi tu avais des amants, des hommes et des femmes, mais que tu avais sûrement beaucoup plus d'amants qu'Alain.
And for the
Alain n'a jamais eu d'amant.
For the first 40 years,
Alain n'était pas du tout homosexuel. Il n'avait pas d'amant.
Enfin, une amante.
Une.
Oui. Oh, no,
Et
Alain
une.
didn't. No, Alain didn't have lovers. He had one mistress once.
oh, okay, one mistress once.
One.
And to wrap up this little summation of how unusual these two ladies are, Madame was the submissive to her husband for about 20 years before she became a dominatrix. She's been a dominatrix for about 40 years. And for the last, these two ladies have known each other almost 20 years.
No, 25.
25 years. And they have been together, Beverly having given her oath, some of which you heard in the film, to Madame 10 years ago. So that is what we have here tonight.
Je n'ai pas besoin de traduire.
Si.
Alors, c'est un résumé de ce qu'on a fait, que toi, tu as commencé en tant que soumise et que tu es devenue dominatrice, et qu'on se connaît depuis 25 ans, et que j'ai donné mon serment d'allégeance il y a 10 ans.
Oui.
Il y a 10 ans. Il faut que je dise quelque chose.
Oui, allez.
Oui, pour Lina. Il faut que je demande pardon à Lina. Ça, c'est très important. Lina, qui a fait ces 2 films, je les ai massacrés.
Tu peux le dire en anglais.
I have to apologize publicly for having massacred Lina's films, because they really are 2 beautiful works of art, and we couldn't watch them tonight, and I so clumsily chopped out chunks of both her films and threw them together to give you some kind of idea of the things we get up to. And I could feel her next to me shuddering and groaning, and I'm sorry, Lina, I'm sorry. You should try and see the film, the real film, completely, because they are very beautiful.
Madame, you are 85 years old now and a famous dominatrix.
J'ai 85 ans, incontestablement.
And I would expect that you would now be resting on your, shall I say, your chains and laurels, and not still doing
Pour
ceremonies.
l'instant, là, vous reposez un peu sur vos chaînes. Vous ne participez pas toujours dans des cérémonies.
Oh, mais si. Ah, mais si, je continue à en organiser, bien sûr. Ce que j'organise est quand même extrêmement théâtralisé, et en tant que metteur en scène, maîtresse de cérémonie, il n'y a pas d'âge. Le dernier cinéaste connu, Manuel de Oliveira, a fait un film, il avait 100 ans, donc j'ai encore quelques années devant moi.
Well, the things, what I get up to is very ceremonial. It's theatrical and ceremonial, and there's no age limit to that kind of thing. The very well-known film director Manuel de
Oliveira
made his last film at the age of 100, combien? 100?
Il avait 100 ans.
100 ans, oui.
Oui,
At the
il est
age
mort
of
à
100.
103.
His last film he made when he was 100 years old. So I've still got many years ahead of me.
It's a wonderful example of defying what we have in this country, where we think sex is for the young.
Bon exemple, tu
I think
défies
sex
la notion que
is
nous avons dans
lost
ce
on the
pays,
young.
la notion que le sexe et la sexualité, c'est pour les jeunes.
Beverly. Oh, Madame.
Oui, ça commence à changer, cette idée-là.
I think this idea is
Oui.
beginning to change.
En tout cas, chez nous, il y a quand même pas mal d'articles qui parlent de ça. Mais ça reste quand même gênant. Tout ce qui est la sexualité des gens âgés, ça continue à être gênant. Ici, je pense, comme ailleurs.
People talk about it more often now than they used to, sexuality for older people, but it remains something that people are not comfortable with.
Mais quand même, dans ce que j'organise, il y a de la sexualité, bien sûr, mais il y a beaucoup d'érotisme, c'est-à-dire de la mise en scène qui relève de cosa mentale. Et ça, il n'y a pas d'âge pour ça. C'est la sexualité qui dérange, mais pas l'érotisation de la vie. Et ça, je ne pense pas que ce soit gênant.
What I do has more to do with eroticism than sexuality. And eroticism has a lot more to do with what Catherine calls cosa mentale. It's in the mind, and there's no age limit for that.
Et il me semble quand même que, avec l'article qu'on vous a distribué et avec le film que vous avez vu, vous savez quand même déjà pas mal de choses sur moi, sur ce que j'organise, sur Beverly, sur nos rapports. Et il me semble que ce serait peut-être plus intéressant que le public pose des questions.
Oui, on verra.
Je traduis,
ça.
je traduis peut-être.
Mais j'ai quelques questions avant.
Très bien, alors
ça.
j'écoute.
But I do want to say,
But
as you
maybe
all
I
know,
should
it's been-
translate that?
Yes.
Yes, I should.
Yes.
Briefly, Catherine said that having seen the film, and you have the article in front of you, I'm sure you haven't had time to read it, but if you're here, you must have some idea of what Catherine's about, what she gets up to. and a little about what I'm about. And Catherine thinks it'll be interesting to move on to the questions and answers, but Toni has other ideas.
Alors, madame, qu'est-ce que je peux faire?
Oh, j'ai pas été bien là. J'ai pas été bien. Bon,
Alors,
je retire tout ce que j'ai dit et on recommence.
All right, I take back everything I said and we will begin again.
We will have a question and answer, perhaps longer than usual, and I want to encourage all of you now to be very bold with your questions. We have an enormous opportunity here tonight that is very rare, and so you can think about that. I have a question for Beverly, which is many people, including Marie-Monique Steckel, who is a very sophisticated French woman, and Lina Mannheimer, who is Swedish, and many American women have said to me they cannot understand how an intelligent, beautiful woman like you would give an oath of allegiance of everything about your life to another person. It's very non-feminist.
We have a lot to thank the feminists for. But I can't agree with everything that feminists say. La question est pourquoi est-ce qu'une femme, enfin, je ne vais pas répéter tout ce qu'elle a dit parce que c'est trop général, mais en tout cas, pourquoi est-ce qu'une femme comme moi accepterait de se donner, de servir, de se donner à quelqu'un d'autre? Je fais du bruit quelque part. Alors, elle dit, moi je dis on a beaucoup de choses, on a des raisons de remercier les féministes pour beaucoup de choses, mais je ne suis pas d'accord avec tout ce que disent les féministes. I hate talking about myself like this. Until I met Catherine, I had a career. I brought up my children almost single-handedly because my husband was a diplomat and traveled all the time. I felt like I was in charge of my life, in control of my life, and I wasn't happy, and I didn't understand why. I felt like I should be looking for religion or looking for a sect or dedicating my life to the service of humanity or doing something. I felt aimless. And I met Catherine, and it happened to be Catherine. It happened to be Catherine. Maybe for someone else it would be someone else. I met this woman, and all I wanted to do was to take care of her. I can't tell you why. I can't tell you why I felt that way. All I wanted to do was to take care of her and do everything I could to make sure that she was happy. And in doing that, it made me... Isn't there a fraternity, an American fraternity called Phi Kappa Psi? Isn't there anyone out there who knows about the American fraternities? And I think that their motto is joy in service. And that's what I found with Catherine. The greatest joy in my life was serving the people I loved, was taking care of my parents, taking care of my children, and taking care of this woman that I love. And it's true that that's where my liberty came from. My liberty came from the fact that I didn't feel that I was looking for something anymore. I was doing something I did very well, and it gave me pleasure to do it. Mais il faut que je traduise.
En gros, parce que ça va être très long.
Non, mais là, maintenant que j'ai un peu formulé ma pensée, c'est plus ou moins que avant de te rencontrer, et j'avais mon métier, j'avais ma carrière, j'avais mes enfants, j'avais l'impression d'avoir une vie assez pleine, et pourtant, j'étais pas heureuse, je cherchais, il y avait des trous, je trouvais pas. Je t'ai rencontré et je me suis rendu compte que ce qui me faisait plaisir, c'était de te faire plaisir, c'était de te servir. Et de te servir, mais de servir les gens que j'aime. Le plus grand plaisir de ma vie vient quand je sers ma mère, quand j'arrive à faire plaisir à ma mère, quand j'arrive à donner à mes enfants ou à mes amis et à toi que j'aime. Plus on aime les gens, plus il y a du plaisir à servir.
Puis je crois aussi que c'est une idée un petit peu bizarre de penser que lorsqu'on sert quelqu'un, quand on se donne à un absolu, on est forcément quelqu'un de sans caractère. Dans la religion catholique,
je traduis petit à petit.
Oui.
Catherine thinks that it is a strange idea for people to imagine someone who has character, who has a strong personality, being prepared to sacrifice themselves to something, to serve.
Par exemple, il est tout à fait admis que quand on devient carmélite dans la religion catholique, quand on rentre dans un monastère, ce n'est pas parce qu'on est passif et qu'on n'a aucun caractère, c'est au contraire, parce qu'on a beaucoup de caractère, qu'on a choisi un absolu et qu'on s'y consacre. Eh bien là, c'est un peu pareil. C'est-à-dire qu'on ne se consacre pas à Dieu, on ne se consacre pas à un au-delà, au Christ, on se consacre à quelqu'un qu'on a décidé d'être à la place d'une transcendance. C'est-à-dire,
je traduis
on
juste
met...
ici.
Oui.
Oui. Catherine says people have no problem looking at someone who has a strong character, becoming a Carmelite nun, dedicating themselves to the service of the church, of God, of their order. On the contrary, it's something laudable, it's something we admire if you have a person with character who is prepared to submit to something greater than themselves. And in this case, we're talking about a person not submitting to and serving their order or God, but another human being.
On a du caractère. Quand on choisit un absolu et qu'on s'y tient, c'est qu'on a du caractère.
If one gives oneself absolutely to anything, that requires character.
De choisir un absolu. Alors, ce n'est pas un absolu qui est au-dessus, qui est dans le ciel, c'est un absolu qui est sur terre, mais c'est un absolu tout de même. Et c'est un engagement fort.
So this absolute thing to which one gives oneself entirely is not in heaven, is not something supernatural, it's something that is on earth, something tangible.
Et Beverly a du caractère, elle a choisi. Et elle a choisi son absolu, c'est moi. Mais c'est bizarre, c'est comme ça. Car, en réalité...
I would like to talk a little bit about the ceremonies and sadomasochism.
Elle veut parler des cérémonies sadomasochistes.
Oui.
What is the role of pain in sadomasochism?
Le rôle de la douleur dans le sadomasochisme.
It's often thought in our society with the 50 Shades of Grey, etc., that masochist is someone who loves pain, and a sadist is someone who likes to give pain. And
Alors,
I would like you to talk about that.
50 nuances de gré, tout le monde a l'idée que le masochiste, c'est quelqu'un qui aime la douleur et le sadique, c'est quelqu'un qui aime faire mal.
Oui, alors là, je crois quand même qu'il faudrait dire quelque chose. C'est que ce mot sadomasochisme est un mot mal formé. C'est-à-dire qu'on a l'impression qu'il y a quelqu'un de sadique qui complète quelqu'un de masochiste.
The word sadomasochist is an unfortunate word because the implication is that you have someone who enjoys giving pain to someone who enjoys receiving pain.
En réalité, un vrai sadique ne peut pas du tout s'entendre avec un masochiste ou une masochiste.
But in real life, a sadist and a masochist are totally incompatible.
Non, parce que un sadique, il ne veut pas du consentement. Et ce qui intéresse un vrai sadique, c'est de violer. Donc il n'y a pas de consentement. Et il n'y a rien de plus triste pour un sadique que d'avoir quelqu'un qui accepte. C'est très déprimant.
A real sadist does not want the other person's consent. A real sadist does not want the other person's pleasure. A sadist who has to do with a masochist or someone who is submissive, who is enjoying the pain inflicted, is a total waste of time.
Parce que, bon, c'est élémentaire, hein, mais je ne sais pas... Bon, vous êtes un vaste public, et je ne sais pas, dans ce vaste public, qui a approché, qui s'intéresse au sadomasochisme, ou qui est très loin. Enfin, si vous êtes là, ça vous intéresse un peu tout de même.
So you're a large audience. I can't begin to imagine who among you might be sadistic or have masochistic tendencies. However, if you're here, it must be because you are at least interested in the subject.
Bon. Alors, il faut quand même dire d'une chose élémentaire. Je regrette de dire des choses élémentaires, mais il y a obligatoirement un contrat entre la personne qui joue le rôle sadique et la personne qui joue le rôle masochiste. C'est-à-dire que même s'il n'y a pas quelque chose d'écrit, il y a quand même un contrat
Dans notre monde.
tacite,
Dans notre monde.
qui est le consentement. Si, dans notre monde, dans le monde sadomasochiste, il y a toujours du
I
consentement.
apologize for stating the obvious, but I'm going to do this anyway. In our world, when there is a relationship between what we have come to understand as a sadist or a masochist, which these are erroneous terms, there is always some kind of agreement, some kind of contract, either verbal or written, or a tacit agreement between the two of them.
Donc quoi?
Donc, je ne sais pas.
Non, c'est-à-dire que c'est un échange de plaisir.
It's an exchange. It's
C'est-à-dire que
give
la
and take.
personne qui joue le rôle sadique a du plaisir, effectivement, à faire mal ou à humilier, et le masochiste cherche ce plaisir qui passe par quelqu'un qui joue ce rôle, mais qui ne joue ce rôle que pour un plaisir mutuel, un plaisir réciproque. Alors évidemment, c'est très bizarre parce que... Enfin, il faut que tu traduises quand même, peut-être.
Oui, oui. So in our world, it has to be between someone who is a sadist or dominant, who is looking for a compatible partner who is submissive or masochistic. And there has to be mutual pleasure. If there is not mutual pleasure, then it doesn't work.
Alors évidemment, c'est... alors, ce qui est très étrange, c'est ce que je dis d'ailleurs au début, là, dans le film, qu'on a affaire quelquefois à des désirs totalement aberrants. Je ne sais même pas si je peux dire les choses, jusqu'où ça peut aller.
Occasionally, as a dominatrix.
Alors,
il faut peut-être que...
Bon,
non,
alors,
on
je dis
reviendra
pas,
ça
je
tout à
dis
l'heure.
pas.
Oui.
Bon.
Non, tout à l'heure, tu verras. C'est de toute façon. As a dominatrix, we are sometimes faced with people, submissive people, who come with desires and requests that are almost impossible to express to people who aren't part of our world.
Il y a dans la tête des hommes pas mal de choses étranges.
There is more in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in men's philosophies.
About how many submissives do you have at the moment? Or
Vous
how
avez
many
de
are...
soumis ou de soumises?
Alors, il y a des relations qui sont quand même très différentes. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a quand même des relations qui sont puissantes, qui sont très fortes. Ben, celle que j'ai avec Beverly, évidemment. Et puis, effectivement, j'ai quelques soumis qui sont... oui, qui me conçoivent aussi comme un absolu. Oui. Et puis, il y a d'autres qui passent. Il faut évidemment qu'il y ait quand même un attrait mutuel. Mais ça peut être une histoire d'un soir, c'est tout.
It's difficult to answer that question because there are in my entourage people who have given themselves absolutely, for whom I am considered an absolute, like myself. And then there are others with whom the relationship is a lot less intense or even transitory. It could even be a meeting, a passing meeting. It could be one evening.
Je ne peux pas dire un chiffre.
Oui,
Voilà, c'est
impossible to
mouvant.
give a figure.
C'est mouvant.
I can tell you there are many, many, many.
Et puis en plus, je tiens à dire tout de même que j'ai deux vies. J'ai la vie de Jeanne de Berg, qui est celle qui organise les cérémonies, qui est assez autoritaire, qui a pas mal de convictions, et il y a l'autre, celle qui est là, qui est Catherine Robbe-Grillet. Et là, c'est une petite vieille dame qui, par ailleurs, s'intéresse à beaucoup de choses, au théâtre, au cinéma, au voyage,
Confiture.
confiture. et qui ne passe pas son temps à dominer.
You must understand that I am two people. I'm Jeanne de Berg, who is the dominatrix, who lives this life considered sulphurous by many. And then on the other hand, I'm Catherine Robbe-Grillet, this sweet little old lady who is interested in the theatre and music and making jam and all kinds of things. But Toni, we must talk about the difference between... Yes.
Male and female?
No.
No, tell me.
We have come to understand that when you talk about a dominatrix, possibly more in the States even than in France, although in France it's the case anyway, talk about a dominatrix, people immediately assume a professional dominatrix, a woman who is paid to dominate. Because that is mostly the kind of woman who is a dominatrix. But there are two kinds. There is the dominatrix where there is an exchange of money, and the kind where there is not an exchange of money. And the question of money is very important because it changes the relationship between the person who is dominant and the person who is submissive. And we've talked at length with many of our friends, dominatrixes who are professional dominatrixes, and ourselves, because Catherine, it is very important to Catherine that money is never, ever exchanged. Not for moral reasons at all, but because it changes her relationship with the submissive person. As far as Catherine is concerned, the moment money is given, it is the person who is giving the money who's in charge. And because she doesn't need the money for any reason at all, if she's a dominatrix, it's purely for her own pleasure. And unless she feels absolutely in charge, absolutely in control, she's beholden to nobody, there is no pleasure for her. Je n'ai pas besoin de traduire.
En gros, j'ai compris.
Oui.
Bon, il n'y a pas d'argent, voilà, c'est ça.
Il n'y a pas d'argent.
Voilà.
J'ai bien précisé que ce n'est pas pour des questions morales.
Non, pas du tout. Pas
absolutely
du tout,
not
pas du tout.
a moral question
non,
at all.
Non, c'est pas pour des questions morales, bien sûr que non. Les dominatrices professionnelles, j'ai beaucoup de respect pour elles. Il y en a qui sont extraordinaires et elles rendent un service. Car il y a beaucoup d'hommes qui ont vraiment besoin de ce genre de choses et qui n'ont pas d'existence, qui n'ont pas de vie sexuelle, sinon celle-là. J'en ai connu, qui sont des hommes pour lesquels on n'a pas pitié. C'est-à-dire qu'ils ont des désirs bizarres, ils sont étonnants. Eh bien, tant pis pour eux. Et là, je trouve que les dominatrices professionnelles, vraiment, comme Griselli d'Israël, eh bien, j'ai beaucoup d'admiration. Elle était admirable. Je dois dire qu'elle rend un service et c'est très bien. Mais moi, je vis ça d'une façon différente.
I have the greatest respect for professional dominatrixes who are not appreciated. There are many men, it's men, et on peut dire les hommes, il y a les hommes qui cherchent.
C'est plutôt les hommes.
Right. There are many men out there who, if it were not for professional dominatrixes, would have no sexual life at all. It's hard for a lot of people to understand that there are men out there for whom there is no sexuality unless there is some kind of domination. There is no sexual excitement, no sexual gratification unless there is some kind of domination involved. And the public sees people like that as poor people that we pity, and they've got a problem, and they're weird, and they've got their bizarre sexuality, and we laugh and we snigger at them. But these are people who would be profoundly unhappy and frustrated if it were not for the professional dominatrixes. Many of them are admirable women. For example, Catherine was mentioning Griselli d'Israël, who was a French dominatrix who worked in Switzerland, who I think ought to have been sainted. She would have the men coming up to her. She came from a bourgeois family and she rejected her family's lifestyle and ended up, she chose to work on the streets, not a fancy call girl. She chose to work on the streets and she loved her job and she loved her customers. And they would come up to her house at 3 o'clock in the morning and they'd be drunk and they'd vomit and she'd throw them out, and then an hour later, she'd find them on her doorstep and she'd haul them back in and say, oh, come on in, and she'd clean them up. And she'd say, what can I do? I can't leave them on the doorstep. And she used to do this for years and years and years. And these are people who are not recognized by
Alors,
society.
il faut tout de même que je signale que ça n'était pas du tout une dominatrice. Elle était prostituée, tout simplement.
Yes,
Prostituée
yeah,
juridique.
Grillet she wasn't so much a dominatrix as she was a streetwalker.
I would like to talk a little bit about the difference between male dominance and dominatrixes, and the complicity that I have heard Madame talk about that goes on between women when they are dominatrixes that is quite different, I think. And I think, for me, it points to a much broader spectrum of the differences, of course, between men and women. And this female complicity, I have seen it, and it's an amazing thing. And I wonder if Madame could talk to us about that. She has a petit clan of dominatrix friends in Paris. There's 6 of them, and they perform ceremonies together. Madame runs them, of course. She is the dominatrix,
Les dominateurs et les
the top
dominatrices.
dominatrix.
Elle dit qu'elle a remarqué, elle s'est rendue compte qu'il y a une espèce de complicité entre les femmes, entre les
Oui, mais
dominatrices qu'elle n'a pas vues.
je crois qu'il y a effectivement une assez grande différence entre la domination masculine et féminine. Enfin, il faut dire en gros, tout de même, là aussi je crois que c'était quelque chose de très connu, mais en réalité à chaque fois je m'aperçois que ça n'est pas connu. C'est-à-dire que le sadomasochisme intéresse à 90%, c'est les hommes que ça intéresse.
I feel like I'm repeating things that everyone knows, but perhaps you don't know, so I'm going to tell you. It is absolutely certain that now and forever, sadomasochism is something that interests 90% men.
Oui, que ce soit dans un rôle ou dans l'autre.
You don't mean 90% of men, but
90% of the people who are interested in sadomasochism are
we
men.
have a show of hands.
Tu disais que
Oui, qu'en général, ça n'intéresse, c'est plutôt le sadomasochisme intéresse les hommes. Bon, donc ça crée un déséquilibre, ce qui fait que la personne désirée dans ce milieu-là, c'est la femme. C'est-à-dire qu'elle soit dominatrice ou soumise, c'est elle qui est demandée, c'est elle qui en réalité, quel que soit son rôle, domine. Parce que c'est elle qui est demandée, c'est elle qui est recherchée. Alors,
tu traduis?
oui,
So people who are interested in SM, not just curious, not just people who are curious, people who are interested in actively participating, 90% of them are men, which creates an imbalance. It means that there are the percentage difference between them means that women dominate whatever happens, whether they are submissive or whether they are dominant, they're in the dominant position.
ce qui fait que quand il y a des dominatrices, moi j'aime bien avoir des complices, j'aime bien avoir des femmes autour de moi, dominatrices aussi, elles ont vraiment tout ce qu'elles veulent. Il y a autant d'hommes qui se présentent, on en a autant qu'on veut. En revanche, par contre-coup, quand des hommes sont dominateurs et qu'ils cherchent des femmes soumises, ils ont beaucoup plus de difficultés.
So myself as dominatrix, I do enjoy very much the complicity of women, and I have a small group of dominatrix friends around me, and we work together. And as dominatrixes, we have an endless supply of submissives who offer themselves to us, as opposed to the men. The men have a great deal of difficulty finding women either to be submissive or to be dominatrixes.
Ce qui fait que ça crée dans les soirées des différences assez notables. Dans une soirée organisée par des femmes dominatrices, il y a une circulation qui se fait entre d'une femme à une femme. Il n'y a pas de jalousie, il n'y a pas de rivalité. Tout se passe dans la complicité et la circulation. Quand il y a des soirées organisées par les hommes, chaque homme arrive avec sa soumise. Et en général, ils ne la prêtent pas. C'est-à-dire qu'ils font des démonstrations, montrer comme elle est bien, comme elle est vraiment soumise, comme elle organise, qu'elle obéit bien. Mais toujours, il y a l'œil, elle est précieuse, cette soumise est précieuse. Donc, on fait très attention. Il n'y a pas vraiment de circulation entre les hommes.
When there's an evening organized by women dominatrixes, everyone shares. The men come and we share them around. No problem, no jealousy. When there's an evening organized by men who are dominant, usually they come along with their woman who is submissive and they stick with her and there's no sharing. And they'll show her off and they'll show off how obedient she is and how beautiful she is and how well she listens to commands, but there's not much sharing.
Alors, en plus, bon, peut-être que moi je vois ça, parce que c'est moi qui l'organise, chez les femmes dominatrices qui organisent des soirées, il y a beaucoup plus, pour moi, de théâtralisation. Alors que quand c'est des soirées organisées entre hommes dominateurs, on passe beaucoup plus vite à une génitalité. Enfin, en belge, quoi.
Est-ce que je traduis ça?
Non.
When I organize an evening, I'm speaking as Catherine, I organize an evening, as you have seen, it's ceremonial, there's a great deal of theatricality involved. When it's men who organize it, they just go straight to the G-spot.
I'm sure you've noticed that I came out with this. Some of you might have seen it before. When I was at an event last year celebrating the anniversary of the Marquise de Sade. You're all hoping for a demonstration, I trust. Madame.
Bah. Dis que c'est toi qui l'as fait. Dis comme tu l'as fait.
Mais je pense que Toni veut une démonstration.
Oui, évidemment. Je pourrais dire à Toni, mettez-vous devant moi. Agenouillez-vous. Posez votre tête sur mes genoux et m'en servir. Ce serait ridicule, je crois. Parce que faire une démonstration, comment dire, je ne vous connais pas. Je ne sais pas qui, là, est hostile ou s'intéresse vraiment. Et je ne peux vraiment être dans le plaisir que si je sens autour de moi une complicité. Or, il y a 360 personnes là. Il n'y a sûrement pas 360 personnes qui seraient des complices. Donc, si je me sers de ça, ça devient ridicule et ça provoquera le rire. En plus, ah oui, il faut peut-être que tu traduises.
Ben oui. Of course I could get Toni to kneel down in front of me and I could use this on her.
I would do it.
And she would do it. But it would be ridiculous. It would be ridiculous because you're 360 people in the audience and it's pretty certain that you're not 360 people who share our way of doing things and our way of seeing things. And I mean, let's face it, even ordinary conventional heterosexual sexuality between two people together, if it's not you, if it's someone else, it's ridiculous. Have you ever imagined yourself when you were in the middle of it? Imagine what someone on the outside might be seeing. I mean, honestly, when I think of myself. So a man and a woman doing ordinary man-woman things together is ridiculous if it's someone else looking in. And when you're doing something even vaguely deviant, let alone something as bizarre as using...
J'avais l'impression que tu rajoutes des trucs.
Oui,
Là.
mais moi j'ai rajouté mes trucs et je te traduirai. Oui, oui. Non, j'ai traduit ce que tu as dit. Et puis après, je me suis dit, mais franchement, quand il s'agit même de sexualité normale...
Très bien, très bien.
Ça, mais ça, c'est moi, c'est pas toi.
Oui.
But I'm glad Toni brought these because I'll tell you about them. 2 years ago, was it 2 years ago?
A little less.
A little less than 2 years ago. Catherine decided that she was going to organize a ceremony around with Toni, who'd become a very good friend since we met her. And this ceremony, the evening, was based on a series of tableau of paintings. And we were going to reproduce the paintings
Du XVIIIe siècle,
of
représentant le
the
châtiment
18th century, representing the punishment of Cupid by Venus.
de Vénus.
And in one of the paintings, a recurring theme was what they call in French the verge, which is a number of canes together like this. And Catherine wanted them, and I made them. And the reason I'm glad Toni brought them is because that way I can explain to you the importance of the objects as part of the ceremony, part of the ceremonial, the ceremony and the ritual behind what we do. Because it's not just a matter of going into a dungeon, the kinds of dungeons that we see in 50 Shades of Grey, and hitching someone up with a pair of handcuffs to a hook on the wall and beating the shit out of them. That doesn't do it for us. What moves us, what is moving for us, is the ritual and everything that leads up to it. And making the object for me was almost as important as what followed, because every one of these canes I had to look for and cut. The length had to be right, the thickness had to be right for it to be cut, because Catherine was going to hold it. It had to be good in her hand. I had to cut off all the little bits I didn't want to cut Toni. I didn't want her skin to rip. So they had to be filed, it had to be smooth, it had to be aesthetically pleasing, and all the time it took to do this, to smooth off the little nodules and to bind the twine around it and to fix it and to make it look beautiful and harmonious. During all that time, I was thinking about what it was that Catherine wanted, about what it was we were going to do, about what was going to happen in Toni's head, what was going to happen in my head and Catherine's, and hoping that we were going to find that communion that makes it so moving. When it happens, when there is a communion between the participants, not just a game, it's not just a game or a joke or a quick hump and you're off. It's a communion. It's people who get together who are searching for the same thing, and every now and again you find it. And the people involved become, it's as if they go into, Catherine calls it the bubble. Everyone is drawn into a little bubble and nothing else exists. Nothing outside the bubble for that period of time exists. And it's something very moving. And it's one of the reasons why we've become so close to Toni, because we had a wonderful experience that transcends everyday life.
Qu'est-ce que je regrette de ne pas comprendre l'anglais?
Ben, j'ai raconté ce que tu racontes tellement souvent. Oui. C'est-à-dire, j'ai dit que j'étais tellement contente qu'elle a apporté pour pouvoir me servir de ça, pour expliquer l'importance du rituel dans ce qu'on fait.
Et des beaux objets.
Les beaux objets, mais tout le temps qu'il fallait pour couper, pour
que tu l'as
pour
pris
fabriquer
dans le jardin.
Dans le jardin, dans le parc du château,
bon, ben, ça va.
etc. Oui. C'est le temps, tout le temps.
Ça va, j'ai compris.
Madame, perhaps I should explain what it's like to be on the other side in a ceremony. What do you think?
Oui, elle demande est-ce que ce serait peut-être intéressant qu'elle raconte, elle, ce que ça
And then we're going
fait
to have questions.
d'être l'objet.
Ah, mais je vous en prie, je vous l'ordonne.
On the contrary, I insist.
Oh, the first time I've relaxed all night. I am under orders. When I first met Catherine and Beverly, it was at the chateau that you saw in the film. I was there for Vanity Fair to do an article on them, and I'd been interviewing them for 2 days. I'd done a lot of background work. And I had heard in the course of our talking about the marital whip, which was a whip about 7 feet long, I think. It's brown and it's braided. And Catherine gave it to Alain just before she married him in about 1956. And I was told it has never been out of use, which I think is around 60-something years. And it lives at the chateau under an urn that contains Alain Robbe-Grillet's ashes. So,
you know what they're thinking? They're thinking this is just so weird.
Well, it's also the truth. So I said, can I see the marital whip? And I wasn't given an answer, but Beverly disappeared. We were in the cottage to the side of the chateau. It was evening, the sun was going down, and Catherine and I kept talking for about 10 minutes, and then she said, follow me. And we walked outside. The moon was going down on the ponds. You saw them in the film. The mist was coming up. We went through a side door of the chateau, down into the bottom of the chateau, where they make the jam, and where Alain Robbe-Grillet has his workroom is still there, where he used to carve. And we went up the central staircase to the main floor, and then up a wrought iron staircase to where I had not yet been, to the second floor of the chateau, where the wallpaper is a black and white of beautiful women, like Gibson girl women with a few nuns thrown in, and the whole walls are women. And we walk along the hall. I'm following Catherine. I didn't say a word. And she pushes on some of the wallpaper, and the door opens. I kid you not. And to a very steep staircase, almost like a ladder. And we climb up it. There's lighting, and we are in the attic of the chateau. And she says, take off your shoes. I, of course, obey. She takes off her shoes, and we walk into a little room. And Beverly is sitting there. The room is lit by candles. We are in the rafters of the chateau. Beverly is sitting on a prayer stool, and there are things all around this little room. It's a very warm room. It's carpeted. It has red flowery wallpaper. And we sit down, and I'm still interviewing them. So what is this? So what is this? There is, I believe, the chest that belonged to Alain's mother, and inside it's filled with bodices and masks and chains and ropes. There's a big acacia thorn that Catherine made. Acacia thorns will really cut you, hanging on the wall, and there's all these different things hanging. And then the mood changes immediately, and they say, go over to the bed. There's a low bed on one side of the room. And I start being told what to do very gently, very calmly, and of course I obey. Take off my jacket. I'm just in, leggings and a t-shirt. I face the wall. Beverly handcuffs me like someone who's done it many, many times, and these were serious handcuffs. Snap, very heavy. She said, hold your hands like this, and I see there's a gigantic big, heavy gray chain hanging from the ceiling, and she wraps that around the middle of the handcuffs. Shall I keep going? We're almost there. And there's a crank, and they take my arms up. These two ladies are atheists, but Catholicism and the props of Catholicism greatly inform the ceremonies. My arms are reaching up. I close my eyes. Everybody, it's completely quiet and very calm in the room. And then suddenly I feel this whip wrap around my center, all the way around me. It's a long whip. I'm sure I made some noise. It was incredible. I'd never been whipped before. Once I kind of calmed down, there was another one that was harder. My emotions started coming up. It's very hard to describe. Madame came up to me, and she looked me very close in between the whips, and she looked very close in my face. And she took, this is so intimate, she took her hand. She has so much power in her hands, I can tell you. She took her hand and she put it in my mouth. And she said, ça commence. It begins. And she went back. Anyway, there were, with pauses in between, 4 more lashes. By then I was weeping profusely, like I'd never really wept before. And then it was finished. I was unchained, and Beverly put me over like in a child's pose. And they just waited while I wept and wept. I felt like these whips around my middle from these incredible women was some kind of bringing the grief of all my life to the surface. And they witnessed it, and they like held it in their arms. It was a most unbelievable experience. And when I had calmed down, I sat up, and they both came around me like fairies, and they looked in my face, and I was weeping, but I was more quiet. I'd had such a deep experience. And they chatted in French about me in front of me, like this. And I felt kind of, it was incredible. And then Madame eventually left. Beverly stayed with me, and Beverly said, right, put on your vest, we're going to go and have a martini. And she makes a mean one. The last thing I'll say about that is, don't forget, they were whipping a journalist from Vanity Fair. Do you realize what the trust involved? The eroticism I've experienced with them is about trust in a way that I never understood before, and the most enormous tenderness. Oui, and now we're going to have questions. Oui, madame. Okay, where are the mics and who has a question? Okay, I see a gentleman there. He probably needs a mic.
Faire des adeptes.
Within this sit on. Within
A lady, excuse me.
within the context of the trust you mentioned, can any of you explain the pleasure-pain concept, which is at the bottom of a great deal of this?
On ne peut pas expliquer, c'est quelque chose qu'on a, je crois d'ailleurs, très tôt, dès l'enfance. Ça ne vient, et il y a des choses qui restent inexplicables. Pourquoi tout d'un coup, quelqu'un qui devrait avoir, je ne sais pas moi, des désirs normaux a des désirs qui sont anormaux.
Catherine says it can't
Alors,
be explained.
évidemment, quand on a lu 50 Shades of Grey, comment ça s'appelle, bon, c'est qu'on a eu un traumatisme enfantin.
Ah non, il faut
Bon.
que je traduise.
Oui.
Catherine says that there's some things that can't be explained. This is something we can't explain. How can you explain why one person gets turned on by one thing and someone else by something else? It's not possible. She says, of course, if you've read 50 Shades of Grey, you've seen the movie, it's obvious. If you have feelings of this kind, it's because you suffered some kind of childhood trauma.
Bon, alors, moi, je ne me rappelle pas avoir de traumatisme enfantin.
C'est refoulé.
Ah ben voilà, peut-être.
Yes, Catherine has no recollection of any childhood trauma. I said, well, it was so traumatic, it's been completely pushed to the back of her mind. Me too, that goes for me too.
Alors, avoir une explication de traumatisme dans l'enfance, ça rassure.
But it's reassuring for people. If you can say that it comes from some kind of childhood trauma, it's reassuring. We can understand this.
Et quand on me pose la question à moi, je dis que je ne me rappelle pas de traumatisme enfantin. Mais il y a plusieurs personnes qui ont fait comme ça une analyse de mon comportement, une psychanalyse de mon comportement. Moi, ça ne me gêne pas. Pourquoi pas? Ça m'intéresse, mais j'ai l'impression que ça ne me concerne pas.
There are psychoanalysts and psychologists who felt the need to try and understand why I do what I do. I don't mind. I don't mind if they want to do that kind of thing, but I feel no need for it myself.
En plus, ça ne me dérange pas, ça ne m'intéresse pas vraiment de savoir d'où ça vient.
And I have no need to know where my desires come from. They just are. They are.
L'important, c'est d'être en accord avec ce qu'on fait. Et je suis en accord avec ce que je fais.
What matters is being comfortable with what you do, and I am very comfortable with what I do.
Et je pense qu'il n'y a pas... Enfin, si vous avez une explication, donnez-la moi.
Anyone who's got an answer, we'd love to hear.
Yes, a question here.
Yes, I.
Oh, okay.
sorry.
You and then you.
Je voudrais ajouter quelque chose. C'est que, au moment de l'apparition du sida, certaines personnes se sont dit on va s'adonner au sadomasochisme, c'est sans danger. C'est une erreur, car si on n'aime pas les coups de fouet, on n'aimera jamais les coups de fouet. Ce n'est pas vrai qu'on peut passer d'un désir normaux à des désirs de ce genre.
With the arrival of AIDS, many people said people are going to become more and more interested in S&M because there's seldom penetration. It's not penetrative sex. And this is the way around it. We can still have sex without sexual contact. And it didn't happen, of course. It doesn't happen. There is no way that you're going to talk someone into enjoying being whipped if the desire doesn't come from the inside.
I was wondering if the Madame could speak a little bit about when she transitioned from being a submissive to a dominant and what that was like for her to make that decision, and if she misses it and wants to be dominated sometimes.
Non. D'ailleurs, vous savez, les relations que j'ai avec Beverly sont de cet ordre-là, évidemment, c'est clair. J'ai l'impression de vivre ma propre soumission à travers elle et de la revivre à travers elle. C'est-à-dire ce que je fais, c'est ce que j'avais autrefois envie de vivre.
The relationship I have with Beverly is that kind of relationship, domination and submission. And I relive my submission through her, but I don't want to live it myself.
Yes.
C'est-à-dire que je suis en même temps la dominatrice et la soumise, mais ça passe par elle.
That is to say, I am simultaneously dominatrix and submissive, but it passes through her. I'm sorry, we're stopping you from asking your question.
Madame Robbe-Grillet spoke of the tremendous imbalance between men and women as adherents of sadomasochism, and that there's, I think 90% was the figure given. Given this fact, isn't it likely that most, and the fact that women very often are paid to act as dominants or submissives, isn't it likely that most of them are doing this simply for the money?
Absolutely.
And are not entering into a genuine psychosexual relationship?
Indeed.
So that many men are simply experiencing play acting and not a genuine relationship with any real meaning.
But you're having often a pretty fake sexual relationship, even just regular heterosexual. So.
On sait que presque toutes les femmes dominatrices ne font que pour l'argent et que les hommes, en réalité, n'arrivent jamais à avoir une vraie dominance.
C'est difficile, effectivement. Enfin, je ne sais pas en Amérique, mais en France, c'est difficile.
Mais c'est le cas.
Alors que je n'ai pas entendu ce qu'a dit...
Non, mais il faut qu'on réponde à sa question.
Mais qu'est-ce que tu as peut-être répondu? Elle a peut-être
No, we didn't
répondu.
hear what you
Elle.
said.
Oh, I just made a joke. I said that.
Qu'est-ce qu'elle a
I
dit?
said that it's not only in sadomasochism that people are having sort of false sexual relationships in regular
Elle dit c'est
heterosexual.
pas uniquement dans le sadomasochisme
It can be
qu'il y a des malentendus de ce genre entre les hommes et les femmes.
Ah oui.
Tu ne veux pas répondre à sa question?
C'est-à-dire que les hommes qui ont du mal à trouver des femmes dominatrices qui ne sont pas payantes, c'est ça?
Oui, il dit qu'il a l'impression alors que les hommes soumis finalement n'ont rarement ou pratiquement jamais affaire avec des vraies dominatrices.
Enfin, c'est le problème, effectivement. Oui. C'est difficile pour certains hommes d'avoir des dominatrices qui ne sont pas professionnelles. C'est très difficile.
For that reason, it's very, very difficult for men to find dominatrixes who are not professional.
En France, en tout cas.
In France, I
Enfin,
suppose
je
it's
ne
the
sais pas
same
ailleurs,
here.
mais enfin, c'est
Mais on
comme
peut
ça.
dire aussi qu'il y a des dominatrices qui aiment, des dominatrices professionnelles qui aiment vraiment ce qu'elles font.
Oui, bien sûr, il y a des dominatrices professionnelles qui aiment ce qu'elles font.
We must
Elles-
say that we have friends who are professional dominatrixes who truly love their job, and their clients very often become their friends. So amongst the professionals, there are women who really, really enjoy what they do.
Mais évidemment, du moment qu'il y a un rapport d'argent, il y a toujours du doute.
But the moment money is exchanged, there's always going to be a doubt,
C'est ça le problème.
and that's the problem.
Okay, last question. Gentleman up there? Yes.
Do you feel as if you've given Beverly an oath, either explicitly or implicitly, and what does that mean when your relationship with her is not the exclusive relationship her with you?
Alors, non, je ne passe jamais de contrat,
No.
et encore moins de serment d'allégeance. Jamais.
Catherine never ever signs contracts, and she would certainly never ever give any kind of oath of allegiance.
Je ne veux pas lier ma liberté.
I do not want to compromise my freedom.
Il n'en reste pas moins que, bien sûr, un tel amour, une telle dévotion vous attache.
However, there is no doubt that this kind of devotion, this kind of commitment, one is attached to someone like that.
Et que je ne pourrais rien faire qui lui soit nuisible.
And I would never do anything to upset her or harm her.
Mais il n'y a rien d'écrit, il n'y a pas de contrat.
But nothing has ever been written, there's never been a contract.
Parce que quand on s'engage dans un contrat, on perd quand même un peu sa liberté.
Because the moment you commit to something, the moment you sign a contract, whether there's a contract that's tacit or otherwise, you do lose some of your liberty.
Je parle d'un contrat écrit, je parle d'un contrat.
Oh, I'm talking about a written contract.
Okay.
I'd like to thank all our speakers for coming tonight. I think you did wonderful. Thank you.